Thank you, Mr. President. I also ask unanimous consent for my intern, Bruce Lehman, to have privileges of the floor for the balance of the day.
Without objection.
Thank you very much. I rise, Mr. President, to address an issue that should be of concern to all Americans, and that is the advice and consent function of the U.S. Senate regarding nominations. This is the critical check envisioned by our founders in which the President has the power to nominate for the executive branch positions and for judicial nominees, and then the Senate is held responsible to provide a check to make sure there are not outrageous nominees that are placed in positions, and that is the advice and consent function, which throughout our history has basically been a simple majority function with very rare exception. Now, this issue comes up at this moment because 2 weeks ago, the minority of this body on the Senate would not allow there to be a vote on whether or not to confirm Mel Watt. They did that by preventing there being enough votes to close debate. So that blockade was basically put in place without respecting, if you will, the fact that Mel Watt is highly qualified for his position at the Federal Housing Finance Agency, the position he would hold, and giving the entire Senate the ability to weigh in about whether or not they agreed with that judgment, the judgment of the President, that Mel Watt was well qualified. And in the same week, this body also blocked an up and down vote on Patricia Millett, who was a nominee for the D.C. Circuit Court. And in this occasion, it wasn't because folks said that she wasn't qualified. They said instead, we don't want to put any more of President Obama's nominees onto the D.C. Circuit Court because we want it to be dominated by the judges who were confirmed when President Bush was president. And then just yesterday, this pattern of blockading up and down votes on nominees continued with the minority filibustering, blocking the closing of debate on Cornelia Pillard. And again, highly qualified individual. The argument wasn't made that there was some exceptional circumstance in her background that left her unprepared for this position. The argument was simply made, we don't want to let the President put any judges on this D.C. Circuit Court. Well, that's extreme concern. And I must say that it has caused folks who have been scholars in this area to look at it. Norm Ornstein of the American Enterprise Institute basically said that's ridiculous for the minority to block up and down votes, not on the basis that there's something wrong with their qualifications, but just because they want to take away the President's ability and constitutional responsibility to nominate individuals to fill vacancies. So this obstruction exercised over the last almost 5 years now has done significant damage to the court. It's done significant damage to the executive branch. It prevents qualified nominees to get an opportunity to have a vote on this floor so that they can, if they receive a simple majority vote of support, so that they can go to work on behalf of the American people, either in their executive branch capacity or addressing the huge backload in our judicial system. The U.S. Senate has this advice and consent role, which is a treasured responsibility. It's a weighty responsibility. And I think everyone in this body, I think all 100 senators could agree that under advice and consent, the Senate must exercise a significant check on the quality of presidential nominees, whether for the courts or for the executive branch. The Senate should vet nominees. The committees that are related to the particular positions should explore their background. They should hold a hearing. They should ask tough questions. They should debate the nominees. And then, once recommended on the floor of the Senate, we should continue that vetting and debating process. And then, having shared our insights on their background, we need to vote to confirm or reject. It should be on very rare exception when there are extraordinary circumstances that make someone unworthy that they should be blocked from having a final vote. Advice and consent must not become block and destroy. But advice and consent has become block and destroy, and the Senate nomination process is broken. A minority of one branch of government, the Senate, should not be able to systematically undermine the other two branches of government. Yet that is what we see today. President Obama's district court nominees have waited, on average, more than twice as long as President George Bush's nominees to be confirmed by the Senate after being reported out of committee. So we have the challenge of getting up and down votes. We also have basically a process of dragging feet in order to make it more difficult to actually get to the votes on these individuals in the first place. For the circuit courts, that comparison is even worse. President Obama's nominees have waited 3.5 times longer than the nominees of his predecessor, 3.5 times longer. The Congressional Research Service notes that of the last 5 presidents, President Obama is the only one to have his district and circuit court nominees wait, on average, more than 6 months for confirmation. So these delays, in combination with ultimately denying the possibility to hold an up or down vote, to hold a final vote on whether to confirm or not confirm, they constitute a systematic undermining of the function of the other two branches of government. Now, this was not envisioned in any possible way by the crafters of our Constitution. They argued there should be 3 co-equal branches. But this outcome, in which the Senate minority seeks to undermine an executive branch, is inconsistent with the constitutional design of co-equal branches. They are not co-equal if one branch can systematically undermine another. And in regard to the courts, this outcome, in which the Senate minority is seeking to ideologically pack the courts by having insisted on up or down votes for President Bush's nominees and then blocking up and down votes on President Obama's nominees, it politicizes our judicial system. It undermines the integrity of our court system. Now, the Senate has confronted this abuse of advice and consent 3 times in recent history. In 2005, the Democratic minority was blocking up and down votes on a series of President Bush's nominees. They were doing the same thing that we see today. And a gang of 14 gathered together to debate this because essentially the Republican majority said, if you don't quit blocking up and down votes on the president's nominees, we're going to change the rules and make it a simple majority. And out of this gang of 14 came a deal. And the deal was that the Democrats would, except under exceptional circumstances, not block a nominee, and the counterpoint being that the Republicans would not change the rules. So they got what they wanted, which was up and down votes without a rule change. Well, that pledge that the Democrats made was honored, and subsequent nominees got their up and down votes. Now, in January of this year, the Democrats, in the reversal of positions, insisted that the Republican minority quit blocking up and down votes on President Obama's nominees. Kind of a deja vu moment, only the two parties were reversed. And out of that conversation, Out of that dialogue in January came a promise from the Republican minority leader of this body, and he promised a return to the norms and traditions of the U.S. Senate regarding nominations. And what are those norms and traditions? Those norms and traditions are simple, up and down votes with rare exception. But that promise was barely made. Within weeks, it was broken when we saw the first ever filibuster of a defense secretary nominee. It just so happened, ironically, that the Republican filibuster, first time in history of a defense nominee, was against one of their former colleagues, Republican colleagues, Chuck Hagel. So the January promise was broken. This led to increasing tensions until July of this year, when Democratic and Republican members met in the old Senate chambers to privately share their concerns, and a new deal was hammered out, which is essentially that the executive nominees would get up and down votes. And that happened for a significant list of nominees. An up and down vote on Richard Cordray to be head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Gina McCarthy to head the EPA, nominees to fill the National Labor Relations Board, nominee to head the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, nominee to head the Ex-Im Bank, and shortly following thereafter, a nominee to be the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Samantha Powers. And so that July deal held through a list of nominees until 2 weeks ago. And 2 weeks ago, this body blocked an up or down vote on Mel Watt. So we're right back where we were before. Right back where we were. The promise made in January shattered, the promise made in July shattered, and the ability of this body to do its advice and consent responsibility shattered. This should be deeply troubling to all. And we must restore the ability of the Senate to perform its responsibilities under the Constitution to advise and consent. The Senate, with simple up and down votes, will be a check on bad nominations by the president. I have voted against at least one of the president's nominees. I was prepared to vote against another. Here, just a few weeks ago, the president withdrew that nominee, so that vote wasn't necessary. But that was related to a judgment of the qualifications of an individual and whether they were a good fit for a particular position. It wasn't about trying to systematically undermine the executive branch and keep them from operating. That's essentially why we have up and down votes, is a check on unqualified individuals or a poor fit for a particular position. So in this area, in both the Senate failure to do its job vis-a-vis judicial nominees and to do its job vis-a-vis executive nominees, we have created unequal branches of government. It is time, Mr. President, to fix the broken Senate in regard to nominations. It is time, Mr. President, to restore the traditional role of the Senate in evaluating nominations so that with nominees who are confirmed, they can go to work in the courts, go to work in the executive branch to do the work that the citizens of the United States of America expect them to do on behalf of our nation. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.